Tonight, reconciliation over retribution. Ghana Bar Association makes emotional appeal for the reinstatement of Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo as the association marks Martyrs Days 42 years after 3 judges were gruesomely murdered.
We are confident that in the spirit of reconciliation, all the various calls made for a reconsideration of the suspension of the Chief Justice in the circumstances, as it sets a poor precedent, will not go unheeded. We yearn for peace and strive for justice.
We'll hear from a son of one of the 3 murdered judges who says the handling of the case against the CJ may constitute an assault on the judiciary.
The Ghana Bar Association reiterates its call to insulate the judiciary from any interference whatsoever. They stand for justice, and they should administer justice to all persons, including themselves.
We'll have details of all of these, plus speak to people who matter in this particular story here on Top Story. Brought to you always by Telecel, connecting energies. Well, tonight, the Ghana Bar Association has reignited a fierce national debate with a fresh plea for the reinstatement of embattled Chief Justice Gertrude Torkornoo, citing the spirit of reconciliation. Now, the call was made during a memorial service marking 42 years since the brutal murder of 3 High Court judges. The plea comes just days after the Chief Justice herself likened her suspension to a siege on the judiciary. The GBA says the independence of the judiciary, once defended with the blood of martyrs, is once again under threat. Baffoe Bonnie is president of GBA.
The Ghana Bar Association, as well as other legal associations, both local and international, such as the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, Commonwealth Magistrates and Judges Association, and Commonwealth Legal Education Association, as a matter of principle, have made their voices heard on the ongoing process for the removal of the Chief Justice of Ghana, Her Ladyship Justice Gertrude A.S. Torkornoo. It is hoped that any Superior Court judge will be well apprised of the entire process before ever being subjected to same in the spirit of fairness. Rising to the defense of the judiciary's independence is the mandate of the Ghana Bar Association, and this is not personality-driven. On this day that we meet to honor the memory of the martyrs of the rule of law, let us resolve as a nation to do ourselves proud and humbly walk away from settling scores endlessly, as we are one nation with one destiny. The Ghana Bar Association reiterates its call to insulate the judiciary from any interference whatsoever. They stand for justice, and they should administer justice to all persons, including themselves. We are confident that in the spirit of reconciliation, all the various calls made for a reconsideration of the suspension of the Chief Justice in the circumstances, as it sets a poor precedent, will not go unheeded. We yearn for peace and strive for justice.
So that's the president of GBA, Baffoe Bonnie there. Now, Engineer Kobene Japan, whose father was one of the slain judges, didn't hold back, calling the attempt to remove the Chief Justice an outright assault on the judiciary. He believes the process should never have begun in the first place.
On a day like this, I mean, it's impossible not to identify with the struggles of the sitting Chief Justice. You know, because the judiciary is one of the 3 legs of our democracy. And the executive changes every 4 years, the legislature, the same thing. But the judiciary remains the bulwark of our democracy. And so We don't want to see any unnecessary interference in the work of the judiciary. And the Constitution is quite clear. I mean, if you have to remove a Chief Justice, then there has to be a commission of a grave offense. And in fact, what surprised me is the fact that they are faceless petitioners. I mean, I've heard of something called, is it Shining Stars? I'm told it's not even registered. I don't know them. We don't know them. And one Daniel Ufori. And what I've listened to so far, the details don't convince me that it passes the test of being grave enough to remove Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. So that's my personal view.
It says the suspension should be reconsidered. Is this something you add your voice to?
I think it shouldn't have started in the first place. It should not have passed the desk of the president. He is the one who can read the petition first and decide whether it's worth moving into the level of the Council of State. I think from what I've seen and what I've heard from the Lord Chief Justice's own press conference, I mean, these are very minor infractions that should not occasion the removal of a person so important in the governance of our country. And you're not careful, it may constitute a certain assault on the judiciary, which we all, a day like this, reminds us of. So it's something that is worrying. I pray and hope that he listens to the appeal made by the Ghana Bar Association, because for me, this shouldn't have started in the first place.
So do you have any views on how this can be remedied at this
No, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to venture into those areas. I just hope and pray that good sense prevails in our country, that we work together as one, and we may have different opinions on how the country should be governed, but at the end of the day, we have one country, and we need to protect the sanctity of our country, and the judiciary is an institution that we all have to support and strengthen, not to decimate.
Well, this is Top Story, brought to you always by Telecel, connecting energies. Time for us to bring in Felix Kwachofosu, who is Minister of State in charge of Government Communications, joining us on the phone lines. I'm grateful to you, sir, for joining. Now, the GBA says, and I quote, "We are confident that in the spirit of reconciliation, all the various calls made for the reconsideration of the suspension of the Chief Justice in the circumstances, as it sets a poor precedent, will not go unheeded. We yearn for peace and strive for justice." Will government listen to this plea by the GBA?
Kojo, it is quite obvious that there are people in our country who want to use the occasion of the dastardly and unfortunate murder of the High Court judges and the military officer to draw non-existent parallels between the current constitutional processes that are underway to look into petitions brought against the Chief Justice and those dastardly murders. Otherwise, I do not see how even the most tenuous linkage can be established between the two situations to warrant the sort of commentary that we are having today. It is surprising that no less a body than the Ghana Bar Association can ask for a willful and blatant violation of the 1992 Constitution simply because of the individual involved. We run a country where the principle of equality before the law underpins justice delivery. How then can it be said that because somebody occupies a certain position, even when the Constitution dictates specific processes that have to be used to look into a particular matter, those processes must be abandoned because of the sensitivity of the position that somebody occupies? I don't think that it is proper. The Ghana Bar Association for quite some time now have tended to behave like a political organization, constantly rehashing and towing the lines of the new patriotic party without regard to fact and substance. And on a day like this, where there should be sober reflection on the happenings of 1982, people think that these emotional appeals must trump constitutional order. There's a reason why the constitution is in place. All to it. So nobody to engage in one activity or the other that allegedly violates Ghanaian law and run behind the sensitivity of their office to insist that due process must not be followed. And as I had cause to indicate last week, Wednesday, in the immediate aftermath of the Chief Justice's press briefing, President Mahama has acted purely based on constitutional injunction. And there's nothing that he has done that is extra constitutional or undermines the 1992 Constitution. Also, I fail to see how undertaking this constitutional exercise endangers Ghana's peace or justice in any way. I would argue that, in fact, if we get to a juncture where no matter one's position in Ghana, you can be subjected to due process, it will mean a triumph for governance in this country. And that is where we need to aspire to. Everybody in Ghana, including the president of this republic, is subject to the constitution. And if he engages in activity that is deemed contrary to the constitution, he must be taken through it. The same applies to the Speaker of Parliament. The same applies to the Chief Justice, to ministers, to all public office holders.
But don't
so
you...
these calls that the GBA consistently makes is completely at variance with their mandate.
Don't you agree
this is not
with...
the sort of language we should be hearing from the GBA. They are essentially saying that justice should have the blindfold that it has removed simply because of who is involved, and that justice delivery or due process has to be dispensed on the basis of who is involved. I don't think that we can accept that kind of narrative.
The caution they are throwing here is, and I want to quote, it says, let us resolve as a nation to do ourselves proud and humbly walk away from settling scores endlessly, as we are all one nation with one destiny. And then as Kwabena Ejejepong posted there, that's the allegations he has heard. I mean, if you look at the person involved, the head of the judiciary, do they amount to subjecting the head of the judiciary to the process that she's going through?
First of all, does it lie in Kwabena Ejejepong's mouth to determine the outcome of this case?
He's not determining.
The Constitution asks all of us to respect the confidentiality associated with this process. Others can go out and blatantly violate the Constitution and receive approbation from the Ghana Bar Association, the body made up of lawyers that is supposed to be the vanguard for the rule of law and due process in this country. How is that acceptable? How can we reconcile this position with what the GBA is supposed to stand for? In any event, what precedent is the Ghana Bar Association president talking about? Should we have a precedent where, based on who you are, the law does not act? Is that the precedent she wants to set? In any event, it is not the first time that office holders occupying offices that are set up by the Constitution have been taken through disciplinary processes. The GBA was in Ghana when Salvatore was removed. What was their position on the matter? At that time, what precedents did they think that had been set? Or is it because that the NPP was in power and President Akufo-Addo did it starts well with them?
Okay.
But the moment an NDC government comes into power, even when the Constitution is obeyed, they say it should not be obeyed. How can we tolerate this sort of duplicity?
Okay, stay with me. Let me bring in lawyer Frank Davis. He is the chairman of the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of the NPP. I'm grateful to you, sir, for joining. Now, if the president or the government should heed to the call by people who say, let's reconsider the suspension, wouldn't it amount to the president sidestepping the Constitution?
Good evening to your cherished listeners and esteemed viewers, and thank you for having me. But I would have thought that on this occasion you introduce me as a senior member of the Ghana Bar Association.
Okay.
Why chairman of?
Let me introduce you as a senior member of the GBA.
So
sure.
Why? I'm a senior member
of the
Ghana Bar Association. Yes,
that's fine.
So fine. Yeah. Honestly, sometimes I would expect that my colleague, Government Minister of Communications, or rather sometimes tone down his language a bit. This haughty language, and always trying to downplay the GBA. I think there's no lie in his mouth. I mean, it's unfortunate that he refers to the GBA as a political wing, as a wing of the MPP. I think it's rather unfortunate. And, those statements, those remarks should not be coming from him. He's a minister of state, for God's sake. He should not be making this sweeping statements. The GBA, there is no other bar association in Ghana apart from the GBA. And there are lawyers in the NDC. So what does he mean by saying that the GBA is a wing of the New Patriotic Party, just to throw in the spokes and make the kind of comments he made? In the first place, if he takes time to listen to what the GBA president said, he will not be making the statement he's making. The GBA is not in any way sidestepping the constitutional process. Nobody is complaining about the process being undertaken now, because I said once and I repeat, the Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana cannot, by any stretch, stop any person at all, a Ghanaian, a citizen of this country, from bringing petitions against her for her removal. That is set and cast in iron and stone. So nobody is disagreeing with what has happened. But if he listened, the GBA president said that she would wish that the appeals, I don't know about them, she stands in a position of knowledge, that the appeals that have been made thus far, and she mentioned a number of associations connected with the law, the appeals that have been made, she would rather that the president would take a consideration of those matters, and if he can, suspend the proceedings or suspend the removal, of the Chief Justice. In what way is the GBA foisting his opinions or this statement on the president? I mean, you see, sometimes when we are analyzing issues, and we should analyze them, taking into consideration all the nitty-gritties, all the ramifications of what we say.
Well, Mr. Davis, they are not foisting it on the president, but I'm asking that if the president should go ahead and listen to the calls for him to reconsider the suspension, I'm asking, since you know the Constitution better than me, won't it amount to the president sidestepping what the Constitution mandates him as a president to
I've
do in this
already
case?
told you that what the president is doing is not a deviation from the Constitution. It is an appeal. The president can elect to do it. He can elect not to do it. I mean, it's a simple matter. It is simple. When? I mean, the people have gone through trials. People have suffered imprisonment in this country by due process and all that. And the president has exercised, not President Mahama alone. Many other presidents have exercised their pardon of clemency. So, what is it? Is it something new? In any event, it's only an appeal. It is only an appeal. Yes, there's a constitutional process going on. But why? Are we no Ghanaian? So if the president does that, then what? The whole country will come to a standstill?
People believe it will set a bad precedent.
That is why I'm saying it is just an appeal. It is just an appeal. It is up to the president to decide to do it or not to do it.
But you agree that if the president should do it, that will be setting a precedent that will be good for us, right?
That will be setting a precedent that will be what?
That won't be good for the judiciary and the Constitution itself.
You are saying it. I haven't said so. I'm saying it's an appeal. It's an appeal to the president. It is up to him to either do it or not do it. If he does A, we can speak to A. If he does B, we can speak to B. At this stage, we haven't gotten there.
Okay.
It's just an appeal.
Okay. Felix, once it's an appeal, and I mean, as people say, the law was made for humans, will it be out of the way if the president considers that, well, the Chief Justice can return from suspension as the process still goes on? Is this something possible that the president may consider?
Yes, Kojo, first of all, that claim is misplaced. The appeal itself is misplaced. And so let me also rebuff this attempt by Mr. Davis to cast my submissions in the mode of some haughtiness. There was nothing haughty about what I said. As for criticism of the GBA and their inconsistencies and what appears to be partisan stances over different matters, it is a valid criticism. And everybody who has lived in this country over the years appreciates what I'm saying. When they first made their call, they came under intense public scrutiny because of what people perceive to be selectivity in the matters that they tend to follow. That's why I posed the question as to how come that when President Akufo-Addo was in power and he went through the same processes, albeit slightly different, to remove Charlotte Osei from power on the basis of incompetence and stated misbehavior, there was no such call from the GBA. When Madame Lauren Lante, the former Shrat commissioner, was taken through similar processes by President Mahama and removed from office for stated corruption and incompetence, the GBA was not heard from. Why are they making exception for the Chief Justice? That is a question that I tend to pose. It is a legitimate question that the GBA must answer. But the point is that what Mr. Davis and the GBA are asking for is not something that the president can do because there is no provision in the Constitution for that. At this stage, it is out of the hands of the president. Only the committee that he set up can determine whether the Chief Justice returns to post or not. The president does not have anything to do with it anymore where the process has gotten to. And the GBA knows this. So why are they calling for something they know the president cannot do? Why are they insisting that constitutional provisions should be set aside? Simply because they are the ones making the call now. Initially, when this matter broke out, the GBA issued what many considered to be a balanced view when they said that the law should be respected and that due process should be adhered to. Then, upon pressure from elements within the MPP,
you have evidence. You have evidence to that effect.
Pardon me?
You have evidence to the effect that they were pressured by elements.
We all know where they stand politically. They were the main driving force behind that resolution, and this was widely discussed. It's not a secret anymore. They publicly voiced those positions. We all heard them. Now, sometimes what we try to do in this country is that in the face of truth, we blink and pretend that it is not happening. The GBA then came back, did a 360-degree turn from their initial position, and asked the president to act unlawfully and unconstitutionally. That is the crux of the matter. What they are asking for is extra constitutional. They are asking for a constitutional violation by the president.
Okay.
And I'm surprised that you in the media are not posing that question to them and asking them how they expect the president of the republic to completely disregard the constitution. But the final point I wish to make is that we cannot live in a country where we operate with a sacred cow mentality, in that depending on who is involved in a particular matter, due process must not be followed. When we have sat in this country and seen the heads of two constitutional bodies removed through similar processes as defined by the Constitution, suddenly it gets to another person and we say that it should not happen because of who the person is.
All right.
That argument is extremely difficult to sustain.
Let me bring in Xavier Kuje, who is the PR of the Ghana Bar Association. Xavier, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. Now, the question that Felix keeps asking you is, why is the GBA making exception for the CJ in this instance?
We are not. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I don't think we are making any exception. The fact that it happened in the past and we didn't ask for what we're asking for doesn't mean that we cannot ask. If the president has exercised a discretion by suspending the Chief Justice, and the bar president in his speech says that calls upon calls have been made by entities in the legal domain for the reversal of that suspension, and she doesn't think that that is a bad call, so the president should reconsider his position. I don't think it's anything bad. It is for the president to decide to do that or not to do that. But I don't think that she's done anything wrong by asking for that.
But is it an issue of the law or reconciliation?
I didn't hear that.
Is it an issue of the law or an issue of law or reconciliation?
Or what?
Reconciliation.
Reconsideration.
Reconciliation. I mean the
reconciliation.
Exactly, yes.
Well, the reconciliation and don't forget today's event itself is all about that. The reason we've been celebrating this Thursday is about reconciliation, because we don't want the things that happened in 1982. If during such an occasion, in her speech, the bar president's speech, she decided to make an appeal to the president that in the light of the many calls that are being made relative to the reversal of the suspension of the Chief Justice, the President should reconsider whether the Chief Justice should be still on suspension or not. I don't see why it should be. It should be difficult for the President to look out and say, okay, I've heard you, but I won't do that. Or I haven't heard you. I don't think it's a bad call, because she has that right to make that appeal to the President. And the President has the right to say, I've heard you, but unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Well, so the point that a lot of people do make, and I heard Felix make that argument strongly, is that GBA was quiet in some time past, but now any decision that the government takes that affect the GBA, they seem to speak. So that is it. Why many people do seem that you are in bed with the MPP? Will it be a legitimate cause for people like that to question the GBA's instance or their decision to decide to speak on some instances and decide to keep quiet in some instances?
I think that if you say people say we are in bed with the MPP, this is not the first time we're hearing it.
Okay.
But the evidence on the ground shows that we are not. If you remember, throughout your Baffoe's tenure as the bar president, President Akufo-Addo will be present at bar events, particularly the bar conference. I can make reference to even the last one that we had just last year about Galamsey. He was sitting there. President Baffoe said whatever he had to say about Galamsey, that he was not making enough effort to fight it.
I remember.
Was President Akufo-Addo not an MPP president? So those things, I think we shouldn't be saying them. This tag about we are skewed towards MPP is rather unfortunate, because that is the way people have always perceived us. But in reality, I don't think that it is. And as I mentioned, the fact that certain people were removed or proceedings had gone on under 416 in the past, and we didn't raise these issues, does not preclude us from raising it later. It doesn't at all. And as I said, let me reiterate, it's an appeal being made. So the President has the right to say that I won't do what you're asking me to do.
But when that appeal, if the President should obey, would make him fault the Constitution, is it one that should be made in the first place?
I didn't hear that, sir.
I'm saying that when that appeal, if the President should obey, will make him fault the Constitution, is it an appeal that should be made in the first place?
That is why the President has lawyers. This is an appeal being made. If his lawyers advise him that this is not a good thing to do because it will be unconstitutional, so be it. But I don't see how you can exercise a discretion and later say that, discretion that I've exercised, I'm withdrawing it. You can always do it. That is my mind.
Okay. All right.
Because it wasn't a mandatory provision in the under the Article 416.
Okay, I'm grateful to you for joining us here. But Felix, finally, before I let you go, I mean, is it right to compare the CJ's position to that of, say, Shraj and the EC? We know that both the three positions are not the same.
The principle is the same. You see, they are all independent constitutional creations. You could say that the CJ's position is loftier, it is higher. She is the leader of the third arm of government. But the principle is the same, in that there are people who chair independent constitutional bodies whose work is independent of the executive. It is government. And therefore, the processes to remove them is clearly defined in the Constitution. So if the head of institution A was alleged to have been engaged in some violation, and the process was used to remove her, and it was deemed perfect, it was deemed right, it was deemed lawful. If the head of institution B was alleged to have engaged in some infraction, and due process was used to remove the person, when it gets to the head of institution C, and due process is used in order to ascertain whether there is basis to remove the person or not, I don't think that you can say that it should not happen simply because of the person involved. That is the argument I've tried to make the whole day. It will be a terrible precedence to begin to apply the law selectively, depending on who is involved. In fact, the reason why the symbol for justice is blindfolded is that she is supposed to be colorblind. So it doesn't matter who you are.
Okay.
So the Ghana Bar Association that subscribes to a profession that has this sort of symbol The symbol of the Ghana Bar Association is two scales, which requires balance. It means that what you do for A must be done for B. How can that same association ask for the scale to be tilted in favor of one person against the other? That is the irony of the situation that we are confronted with.
I'm grateful to you, Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, for joining us here. I'll give the last bite to you, lawyer Frank Davis, before we go. I mean, do we still have Frank Davis on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Yes. So let me give the last bite to you. You've listened to Kuje. You've listened to, the government side. What do you make of what's happening? Yeah.
You see, Felix should not be comparing mangoes with apples, same way comparing oranges to pineapple. I mean, he cannot put the Sheriff's Commissioner and Loretta Lamte, the Sheriff's Commissioner Loretta and the
Charlotte
EP Commissioner Charlotte Osei on the same scale as the Chief Justice. I think that is very, very disrespectful. The Chief Justice is the head of the Judiciary, the third arm of government. And I think he should respect that. You see, and stop making those comparisons. In any event, is it any fatal that because the GBA did not say this yesterday, it cannot say that today? I mean, I find no logic in that analogy. That because something happened yesterday, you didn't say it, because then when it happens today, you are forever gagged from saying it. I mean, come on. We have one country, Ghana, to deal with. In any event, I have not seen any of the petitions. But the petitions that have been bandied around, that have been thrown into the public space, the kinds of things that are being said without any rebuttal from government, are these petitions which should call for the removal of the Chief Justice? Come on, are these petitions which should call for the removal of the Chief Justice? The Chief Justice sits on a case with the panel.
All right.
And when a decision is made by that panel, she is to take the flak for that decision.
Okay.
Don't let us go into those matters.
I'm grateful to you. Lawyer Frank Davis is a senior member of the Ghana Bar Association. It's now time for us to bring you Newsnight.